I think my media roles have resulted in trust, but that's not why I got into it. I got into it because what an incredible platform to be able to be in front of a camera for whatever time I have, whether it's 3 minutes or 10 minutes, and to educate the public, on average, about 80,000 people at a time that allow me into their homes, their kitchens, when they're drinking their coffee, to listen to evidence based information about healthcare and how they can advocate for themselves.
This is Inspiring Women. I'm Lori McGraw, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Archelle Georgiou. She is a Johns Hopkins-trained physician. She is an author. She is a 16-year medical correspondent. She is somebody who is passionate about providing empowered, informed medical decisions and giving people the opportunity and education for how to make those, not as simple as it sounds. She's a book author. She is on board. She is leads companies. Dr. Archelle Georgiou, thank you for being on Inspiring Women.
Oh, Lori, it's an honor to have you invite me. Thank you.
Well, let's talk about a couple things. I want to start with leadership. You are a trained Johns Hopkins physician. So to be at that type of top academic organization, to be a physician, that's a big deal in and of itself. You went from being a physician, caring for patients, to taking on a series of leadership positions at some of the largest organizations, brand name recognized organizations that we know. Can you just walk us through that change from physician to leader?
Sure, absolutely. I was in practice for 5 years and I loved every single minute of patient care. What I didn't love was the impact of managed care on patient care.
Mhm.
It was intrusive, it was frustrating, and many of my colleagues and I would complain about the same issue when we were having lunch. But all of the stars aligned, and I did an unorthodox thing, which is that when an opportunity came up to join initially Cigna Healthcare as an associate medical director, I took the opportunity. It was relatively low risk, and I thought that I could have a bigger impact by joining the industry as opposed to trying to have a practice that didn't rely on managed care.
So there's been an enormous amount of change and shift in managed care in terms of just the influence of these organizations on the entire healthcare ecosystem. So if you can go back and just look at all those decisions that you made, did you expect the industry to change as it has when you started off in the managed care leadership roles?
I really didn't know where it was going to go, but to be really honest, maybe I was too young in my career to be thinking that far ahead. But I am shocked at the influence that the health insurance industry has on the overall health care system. The
Mhm.
companies that are in the market today are behemoths that control not only how healthcare gets financed, but how healthcare is delivered. And it's the two of those together that I wasn't expecting. You know, when I started in this industry, Kaiser Permanente was an anomaly as an integrated healthcare
Right.
system. So to have so much of the healthcare system be structured like that today, I would say, looking back, yes, it's quite a surprise.
And so important that to understand the clinical influence in decision making for patients and then the financial influence. And that's some of the shift that's really interesting. So, Dr. Giorgio, you've been a medical correspondent for over 16 years. You are an author, you are an advocate on a mission for people to make the best decisions they can about their own medical care. So, let's just start with not you, but from a why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for somebody who is not a clinician to, first of all, navigate the healthcare system? And then what kind of choices should people be making before they actually go to an authority like a physician?
Let's start with why it's so hard. There are many different factors. I'll try to list a few of the very biggest ones. So, first, it's a complex system to navigate, even for
Yep.
an insider. sometimes it's hard for me and my family to navigate the system. So it's complex. Two is that there's a different language in healthcare that's spoken by everyone from people in the insurance industry to your doctors and providers. It's a different language that lay people don't understand and also get intimidated by. The third, this is a little bit of an opinion, but I think well researched, we have a very paternalistic culture in the United States.
That is very well studied.
You know, some people may disagree with that today, but I do believe it's still paternalistic. Since our founding fathers started this country, we listened to our parents, our preachers, our professors, and our physicians. And actually, if you look at global data, we are one of the most rule-abiding societies in the world.
Mhm.
And so we listen to what our doctors say, and we're taught to listen to authority. And that's not an unreasonable thing to do, to listen to people with expertise. But we need to be listening critically so that we can ask questions about what's best for our own health. And when you do listen critically, and when you do ask questions, then you're starting to take responsibility for your own health. And that scares some people. The more serious the condition, the more I've seen patients want to back off from being the decision maker about, do I take this drug? Do I not take this drug? Because
Yep.
then they're responsible for the outcome.
If we think about just that trust in the system, I'm glad you brought that up because what we know from trust studies, so Edelman puts out a trust barometer every single year. And what we've seen is that the level of trust of systems like the government, like even health systems, has started to decrease in ways that is surprising. Some of it might not be surprising, but it is decreasing in ways where trust is a real issue. People, and the younger you go, start to trust friends and family more. But the trust in physicians, the trust in nurses, that has maintained a very, very high bar of where there is trust. So, is that some of the reason? I don't know if it's the studies, but is that some of the reason why you decided to become a medical correspondent and somebody who is actually not just doing the work of being a physician or at a leadership level, but actually speaking and bringing education out in a broad social set of platforms?
I think my media roles have resulted in trust, but that's not why I got into it. I
Hmm.
got into it because what an incredible platform to be able to be in front of a camera for whatever time I have, whether it's 3 minutes or 10 minutes, and to educate the public, on average, about 80,000 people at a time, that allow me into their homes, their kitchens, when they're drinking their coffee, to listen to evidence-based information about healthcare and how they can advocate for themselves. That is a huge opportunity. And I'm going to
Hmm.
tie a few questions together. When you asked me why I transitioned from being in practice to being in managed care, I stated some, um, you know, just frustrating reasons why I switched. But I also did a math equation when I was in practice. And I thought, well, if I'm seeing 15 patients a day for the next 30 years, how many people can that be?
Yep.
That number just didn't feel impactful enough to me. And so when I think about the impact of talking to 80,000 people at a time, every single week, sometimes twice a week, what a privilege that is. And what an opportunity that I take very, very seriously.
And in terms of the information, that what kinds of information are you talking about? What information are you providing?
Well, let me just share the framework and the setup for my segments. I've done about 2,000. And
A
there's a
few.
little bit of a formula, as you might expect. I've been doing it for so long. I select all of my own topics every single week. And that means that I've scanned the news and I pick the one topic that I believe the public needs to know about that week. I run it by my producer out of respect for their role because
Hmm.
they're responsible. They always say that they like it. And then I create that segment. I create the Q&A, I create the graphics, and then I go in and I work with an anchor and I deliver the information. So what sorts of topics do I cover? everything,
Mhm.
everything from a recent segment on a research study that came out that said caregiver instinct among parents should be listened to, right? If a parent says, I think my child is not acting normally, there's
Yep.
studies to show that the provider should listen to that and take it into account as an important data point. I've done countless episodes on heart disease, everything from heart disease to anorexia to you name it, to some public policy explanations and everything in between. So it just depends on what's in the news that week and what I believe people need to have as information so that they can be armed the next time they're seeing their doctor.
Well, the importance of, again, that trust coming from a physician, and then also your leadership from, multiple different platforms, being a physician, being a leader at United Health Group, being a leader advising companies, but then as a media leader, as a trusted advocate for how people should be responding to confusing information. It is complex. I've been in healthcare a very long time as well. And it is surprising and always very frustrating when people ask me for help to navigate a healthcare system that is fragmented. It just isn't easy. So it's 2,000 segments. My gosh, that's just amazing. Let's talk about impact though. So, you mentioned that you chose media as a platform because of the impact that you could have reaching so many different people. That's wonderful. During the time of COVID, the pandemic, it seems
Wow.
like forever ago, but it actually wasn't. That was a moment in time where you went into very, very fast action to give information to the public. You brought together a couple crisis response teams. Can you just talk about the work you did during that time and why did you how did you find your outlet as a physician? We were all very confused during COVID.
And very scared. All of us were.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so I'll point out two things about what I did during COVID. One is that while my segments on TV, on the news, are usually once a week, sometimes
Mhm.
twice a week, they asked me to come in every day of the week for 5 weeks. So that's what I did. So the first
Mhm.
few weeks, the first month and a half of COVID was a blur for me because all I did was read whatever science was available, figure out how to translate it for the public
Yep.
in a way that people could understand it, go deliver it, come home, wash and repeat. So I did 180 segments on COVID. But the other thing that I did was I'm really proud of it. And it is that there was a moment in the first few weeks, it was the end of March of 2020. And I remember being so frustrated that the Johns Hopkins dashboard, which the whole world used,
We were all watching it.
was exactly, they were counting cases and they were counting deaths. Amazing. But in reality, cases were underreported because testing kits weren't available. Deaths are a lagging indicator. And it just seemed like common sense to me. Like, well, where's the hospital data? I mean, that is the real time data that would reflect data around the sickest individuals who are being impacted by this new virus. And I was talking to a colleague of mine who's a health economist at the University of Minnesota, Dr. Pinar Karachamandik. And I said, Pinar, I mean, these two metrics that we're using are not good enough. We have to find hospital data. And she said, well, it must be available, Archelle. And we spent 2 days and researched public health departments, online. Hospital data was not available. So we decided on a Friday night that we would launch a website and we would start tracking. But where would we get the data from? Because it wasn't available. We decided that we would write a letter every single day, starting Monday, to every public health department of the country, all 50 every day, with a request to get data around the hospitals in their state and their hospitalizations. And we did that for several days. Initially, there were only 12 hospitals that made the data available. Of course, by about the end of a month, all 50 were reporting. And we consolidated all of that data into a national tracking dashboard that was hosted by the University of Minnesota. And we did that for the next 2 years. It became a resource for weekly downloads to National Public Radio. It was in the New York Times. It was in the Wall Street Journal. We actually had 12 peer-reviewed publications come out of that data, including 4 in JAMA. Really proud of that. And it informed our policymakers. It informed the public. And it came from me and Pinar getting frustrated that we couldn't find hospital data. So
That is
there's
incredible.
sometimes there's just a problem that's staring you in the face. You think, well, somebody had to have figured that out, and nobody
Yeah.
has. And we just did it on the weekend.
That is incredible. That is just remarkable, and also just sort of speaks to being in the moment, resourceful, and then what you can do with that. So with that, and what you accomplish with just very few resources and just making something happen, the impact that comes out of that. I'm just interested in that translation of leadership. So taking action, doing something. You in your career, Dr. Giorgio, you've gone from, physician, leader, companies. Now, this project would had enormous impact in a time of need for the world. And you continue to advocate for people. You continue to lead at the highest levels. So, how do you think about your leadership style? How do you think about transitioning from being a business leader, a physician leader, a media leader? How do you think about that in terms of going from one to the other, remaining authenticity, remaining sort of like that clinical understanding, and just what advice do you give to others? Because there are many people who sort of stay on one track. You seem to be running 5 tracks at any one time.
So thank you for referring to me as a leader. I just see myself as a really passionate physician who wants to make healthcare better.
Hmm.
It's translated into some wonderful opportunities. But I'll point out a few things to answer your question. One is that my true north is that consumer healthcare, patient healthcare, is always my number one priority. Could have been in my office, it could have been at United, whether it's in the news, it doesn't matter. It is my number one true north. The second is that whatever arena I'm playing in, whatever table I'm sitting at, I always remember where I came from. And it's from pretty humble beginnings. Parents who didn't even finish elementary school. And so I am grateful for every opportunity, for every seat at the table. I'm never better than anyone else and just trying to solve a problem. And sometimes the problems are really big, like the ones we just talked about with COVID, and sometimes they're just small. But to me, as long as I'm solving a patient care problem, that's what I'm going to work on.
So, with the true north being that patient and that patient in a very complex, fragmented healthcare system, if we think about reinvention, which you seem to be actually quite professional at, you know, and if we just think about the future, what do you have your eyes set on? What's next for you?
Everybody asks me what I'm going to be when I grow up. And Lori, I just take the next best step that becomes apparent to me in my world. So one thing that I think I've done very well is that I'm a calculated risk taker. I am not afraid to take risks. And I'm very good at assessing the opportunity that's behind a door that has just inched its way open. So what opportunities am I looking for? I wouldn't say that I am navigating toward anything, but I'm always watching for that door. Is it a public policy? Is it larger public speaking events? It could be any of those things. And when I see the opportunity, I assess how many people, how many individuals' health could this impact? And then I assess that opportunity and decide whether I'm going to do it. I would say that one thing that I do that is really unique that I will highlight is that ever since I've been on my own, because I left UnitedHealth Group in 2008, and I've been a strategic advisor since then, which means I work for myself. Every single year, I work with myself to create a strategic business plan. And that means doing everything from a review of the previous year to a SWOT analysis, what worked well, what didn't work well, and then create my strategy for the upcoming year and a very detailed action plan with metrics on what I want to accomplish. I've done that every single year with documented business plans whose audience is just me, the N of one. And I think that that's been extremely valuable for me to continue to advance, to continue to reinvent myself, to continue adding value. And I've shared that information before and people admire it, but they don't do it. And the question
Mhm.
for themselves. And the question I ask is, why not? If you are a leader in a business, then you are used to the business planning process. You know that every year you have to put a business plan in place. Why don't you do that for yourself? The Department of Transportation a few years ago came out with an analysis of what a human life is worth, as if we could put money on it. But for what it's worth, they said a human life is worth $10 million. And does a $10 million business have a business plan? Of course it does, every single year. So why don't you, as an individual, take the time and make the investment in figuring out where you are going to go in the next year, in the next 3, in the next 5, so that you can continue to add value and grow as an individual?
I think that's a really great roadmap for people. And why don't people do it? I don't know. But what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Giorgio, clearly impact with the North Star as the patient. I'm assuming those are somewhere on your SWOT analysis of how many people am I helping to make those informed decisions about their own health and care, as well as, where you can use your voice, your platform, as well as the trust that you've put forward for people. It's so important. I know how important it is, just as trust erodes in other places, that they look to leaders, clinicians, trusted voices like yourself. I have to ask this question. This is
Sure.
inspiring women. And for others, for other women who have done multiple things, but are also looking to reinvent or do have more impact in whatever their next might be. What advice might you give them besides doing their own SWOT analysis and
Sure.
business plan?
I think it's really important to have clarity around your core talents. I don't mean the degree behind your name, and I don't even mean the skills that you have, but the core talent that you had that made you win a little contest when you were 5 and got an A when you were 12, right? Whatever it is that, whatever way that you are wired that made you successful as a young child, as an adolescent, in college, et cetera, what is the common thread that, um, that it defines those things? Know what that is. So that's number one. And know what uh, larger impact, I'm going to use that word again, but for a different reason, you want to have, and the environments in which you succeed. So let me just define those for myself so that I can be specific about what I mean. I am naturally a storyteller. I've been that since I was 5. I do it pretty well today. I think that defines why I'm pretty good in the media. I love healthcare. I breathe it. I have tried to dabble in spaces that are not healthcare. It's just not for me. So I'm always healthcare driven. And I also know that I have to have a combination of product development and data to I have to get my hands dirty. So I'm not a talking head. I have to talk about something I built.
Mhm.
So whatever opportunity I look at, I'm looking at, is it in healthcare? Is there a data product development component? And can I tell a story about it to an audience? It has to meet those criteria. That opens up many, many more opportunities than looking at a degree behind my name and what can I do next. So
Well,
I
I
would
love that.
encourage everyone to understand those elements for themselves.
I love that specific advice. And it's really helpful as people, because people are sort of like thinking, have I done enough? But there's always more and you're always pushing. And I applaud you for it. And I've been so excited to talk to you. So this has been a great, inspiring women conversation. I've been speaking with Dr. Archelle Georgiou. And Dr. Georgiou, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.